Dr. Marcus Blackwood's Oxford shoes clicked against the marble floors of Mount Sinai Hospital with military precision. 5:30 a.m. meant empty corridors, fluorescent lights humming their sterile symphony, and the kind of silence that only existed before the chaos began. At 52, Marcus had perfected the art of intimidation wrapped in surgical brilliance, his reputation preceding him like a storm front. His corner office overlooked the city's awakening skyline, mahogany walls lined with awards and commendations that read like battle trophies. The American College of Surgeons, the Society of Thoracic Surgeons, Physician of the Year, 3 consecutive terms. Each frame caught the morning light, casting shadows that seemed to bow in reverence. Marcus settled behind his desk, fingers drumming against the leather surface as he reviewed the day's surgical schedule. A triple bypass at 8, emergency valve replacement at noon. The afternoon held promise of a complex case, a quadruple bypass that would challenge even his steady hands. Your coffee, Dr. Blackwood. Patricia appeared at exactly 6:15, her timing as precise as his expectations. Black coffee, no sugar, no cream, no deviation from the routine that had sustained him through 15 years of cardiac surgery. The Morrison case has been moved to Thursday, she continued, placing the cup exactly 3 inches from his right hand. Dr. Reynolds wants to discuss the new resident rotation. Marcus nodded without looking up. Residents came and went like seasonal changes. Some survived his teaching methods. Others transferred to different departments with wounded pride and shattered confidence. He had no patience for weakness, disguised as sensitivity. Dr. Reynolds entered without knocking, his administrator's smile failing to mask the underlying tension. Marcus, we need to talk about the students. What about them? 3 complaints this month. Parents calling. Professors expressing concern about your teaching approach. Marcus finally looked up, his gray eyes cold as winter steel. Are my surgical outcomes being questioned? Of course not. Your success rate is unmatched. Your research grants keep this department afloat. But there's a difference between demanding excellence and what? Coddling them? Marcus stood, his 6-foot frame casting a shadow across the desk. These students will hold human hearts in their hands. They'll make decisions that determine whether someone's child comes home for dinner. If they can't handle honest feedback, they have no business in an operating room. Reynolds shifted uncomfortably. Just consider tempering your approach. Today's rotation includes some promising students. One particularly impressive candidate, Rivera, I think. Top of her class. Incredible work ethic. Marcus returned to his schedule, dismissing the conversation. We'll see if she's impressive when it matters. The intercom crackled to life. Dr. Blackwood, your 7 a.m. rounds are ready. He straightened his white coat, checked his watch, and prepared to begin another day of surgical precision. In the reflection of his office window, Marcus saw what others saw, a man who had mastered the mechanics of healing while remaining untouchable himself. The irony never occurred to him that in protecting himself from feeling, he had forgotten how to teach with anything other than fear. The hospital was waking up around him, nurses changing shifts, residents clutching coffee like lifelines, medical students reviewing notes with the desperate intensity of soldiers preparing for battle. Marcus moved through it all like a general inspecting troops, unaware that today would bring a collision that would challenge everything he believed about strength, vulnerability, and the true meaning of healing. Jessica Rivera arrived at Mount Sinai 45 minutes before her scheduled start time, her worn leather medical bag clutched against her chest like armor. The hospital cafeteria hummed with the early morning energy of shift changes and brewing coffee. But Jessica found a corner table where she could spread her notes one final time. Her hands trembled slightly as she reviewed the cardiac anatomy diagrams she'd memorized the night before. Every line, every valve, every vessel mapped in her mind with the precision her father Miguel brought to repairing electronics in his weekend shop. Worked twice as hard to get half the recognition, mija, he'd always said, his calloused fingers teaching her that excellence was the only currency that mattered in a world that questioned her right to dream. The aroma of industrial coffee mixed with her anxiety, creating a familiar cocktail that had sustained her through 4 years of medical school. Jessica calculated the cost of her breakfast. $3.50 for toast and orange juice, money that represented 2 hours of her mother Rosa's work at the textile factory. Every meal, every textbook, every moment of study carried the weight of her family's sacrifice. Her phone buzzed with a text from Miguel. Remember, Doctora Pequeña, you belong there. Make us proud. Jessica smiled despite her nerves. Her father had called her Little Doctor since she was 8 years old, stitching up her brother's scraped knee with the precision of a surgeon. Miguel worked double shifts at the electronics repair shop, his weekend side business funding her education while Rosa cleaned office buildings before dawn and returned home after midnight. Their American dream lived entirely in Jessica's hands. "You're the new rotation, right?" A tired-looking resident approached her table, coffee stains decorating his scrubs like battle scars. "David Chen, second year. Let me guess. Cardiac surgery? How did you know?" The look of terror mixed with determination. Classic Blackwood rotation syndrome. David sat down uninvited, lowering his voice. "Fair warning. Dr. Blackwood eats medical students for breakfast. Brilliant surgeon. Absolute nightmare as a teacher." Jessica's stomach clenched. "What do you mean?" "Last month, he made Jennifer Walsh cry in front of the entire surgical team, called her medically illiterate because she couldn't name the branches of the left coronary artery fast enough. She transferred to pediatrics the next week. Maybe she wasn't prepared." David laughed bitterly. "Jessica, right? Word of advice. Being prepared doesn't matter with Blackwood. He'll find something to criticize. Just keep your head down, don't ask questions, and pray you're invisible." Jessica's phone displayed a photo of her parents at her medical school graduation, their faces glowing with pride and exhaustion. Miguel wore his only suit, the one he'd bought for her high school graduation and saved for special occasions. Rosa clutched a handmade sign in Spanish. "Our daughter, the doctor." "I can't be invisible," Jessica whispered, more to herself than to David. "Too much depends on this." David followed her gaze to the photo. "Family sacrificed everything." "Everything." Jessica closed her notebook, decision crystallizing in her chest. "Then I guess I better be twice as good as everyone else expects me to be." She gathered her materials and headed toward the cardiac surgery wing, her father's voice echoing in her memory. "Some battles are won not by being the strongest, but by refusing to surrender." The elevator doors closed behind her, carrying her toward a collision that would test every lesson Miguel had taught her about dignity, determination, and the true cost of dreams. The collision between worlds happened during morning rounds. Dr. Blackwood led his team through the cardiac ICU with the precision of a military commander, each patient bed a strategic position requiring tactical assessment. Jessica struggled to keep pace behind the group of residents, her notebook filling with frantic observations, while her mind raced to absorb the rapid-fire medical terminology. "Patient in bed 7 presents with post-operative complications following mitral valve replacement," announced Dr. Amanda Foster, the senior resident. "Moderate pleural effusion, controlled arrhythmia, stable hemodynamics." Marcus stopped abruptly at the foot of the bed, his gray eyes scanning the monitors before settling on Jessica. "Mrs. Rivera, what's your assessment of this patient's immediate risk factors?" Jessica's mouth went dry. 20 pairs of eyes focused on her as she approached the bedside, her hands trembling slightly as she reviewed the chart. The pleural effusion suggests possible fluid accumulation that could compromise respiratory function. Combined with the arrhythmia, there's risk of decreased cardiac output affecting tissue perfusion. Technically correct. Medically sound. Delivered with the nervous hesitation of a student walking through a minefield. Marcus's withering glance cut through her like a scalpel. The other residents exchanged knowing looks. They'd witnessed this pattern before. Fresh meat meeting the predator. Alternative treatment approaches for the effusion could include, Jessica began. "Students observe and learn," Marcus interrupted, his voice carrying the authority of 15 years wielding absolute power. "Questions come after competence." The fluorescent lights seemed harsher suddenly, the antiseptic smell more overwhelming. Jessica felt the heat of embarrassment crawl up her neck as the team moved to the next bed, leaving her standing there with her half-formed question dying in the sterile air. Dr. Foster caught her eye briefly, a look of sympathy mixed with warning. "Welcome to the battlefield disguised as a teaching hospital." The operating room transformed into a cathedral of tension as Jessica entered for her first surgery with Dr. Blackwood. The space hummed with controlled chaos, monitors beeping rhythmically, the surgical team moving with choreographed precision, and the metallic scent of instruments mixing with antiseptic. Jessica positioned herself as the furthest assistant, trying to anticipate needs while staying invisible. For 2 hours, she successfully handed instruments, maintained sterile protocol, and observed Blackwood's masterful technique on a complex triple bypass, His hands moved like a pianist performing a concerto, each motion deliberate and graceful. The patient's heart, exposed and vulnerable, beat steadily under his care. "Debaki forceps," Marcus commanded without looking up. Jessica's confidence swelled. She'd been perfect for 120 minutes, proving David Chen wrong about being destined for humiliation. Her hand reached confidently for what she believed was the requested instrument. The forceps felt right in her grip. She'd practiced this exchange hundreds of times in simulation labs, but as she placed the instrument in Marcus's waiting palm, time seemed to crystallize around a terrible realization. Wrong instrument. The silence that followed felt eternal, 20 seconds that stretched into a lifetime as Marcus's eyes turned glacial above his surgical mask. The monitors continued their steady rhythm, indifferent to the professional execution about to unfold. Every person in the room sensed the shift, the moment when competence became catastrophe. Jessica's world tilted as Marcus's gaze promised consequences that would echo far beyond this operating room. "Doctor," Blackwood's voice cut through the operating room like a scalpel through flesh. "Did they lower admission standards? Or are you simply proof that some people shouldn't be doctors?" The words hit Jessica like physical blows as the entire surgical team froze. Marcus continued his verbal assault while maintaining perfect surgical technique, a horrifying display of multitasking cruelty. "This is a human heart, not a practice dummy. Your incompetence could kill someone." His hands never wavered as he worked, each suture placed with mathematical precision, while his words systematically dismantled Jessica's confidence. "Perhaps you should consider a career better suited to your current limitations." The monitors continued their steady beeping, indifferent to the emotional carnage unfolding. Jessica's vision blurred with unshed tears as she realized every person in the room, nurses, residents, technicians, was witnessing her professional execution. Tommy Chen, the surgical tech, couldn't meet her eyes. Dr. Kim, the anesthesiologist, suddenly found the drug charts fascinating. "Stand there and try not to contaminate anything else," Marcus commanded, his attention returning to the delicate bypass graphs. The surgery continued for another hour, each minute stretching like an eternity as Jessica stood frozen, afraid to move, afraid to breathe, afraid to exist in this space where her dreams were being systematically destroyed. Her father's voice echoed mockingly in her memory. "Make us proud." How could she face Miguel tonight? How could she explain that 15 years of family sacrifice had led to this moment of complete professional humiliation? The fluorescent lights felt like interrogation lamps, the antiseptic smell turned nauseating, and the monitor's beeping became a countdown to disaster. Jessica stumbled from the operating room like a survivor of a natural disaster, her surgical gown clinging to sweat-dampened scrubs. The hospital corridor, usually bustling with purpose, felt like a gauntlet of whispered conversations and sympathetic glances. She could feel their eyes following her, marking her as another casualty of Dr. Blackwood's surgical brilliance and personal cruelty. Nurse manager Linda Washington found her in the supply closet, surrounded by boxes of gauze and saline, sobbing with the kind of grief usually reserved for funerals. "He does this to everyone," Linda whispered, her weathered hands gentle on Jessica's shoulders. But the words offered little comfort to someone whose entire identity had just been shattered in front of a room full of witnesses. Jessica's hands shook as she called her father from the hospital parking garage, the concrete walls echoing her broken Spanish as she tried to explain that maybe she wasn't cut out for medicine after all. Maybe David Chen had been right. Maybe she should have stayed invisible. Miguel's silence on the other end spoke volumes, not of disappointment but of a father's heart breaking for his daughter's pain. Finally, his voice came through the phone, steady and strong. "Mija, some battles are won by not surrendering." The city lights blurred through her tears as Jessica considered whether 15 years of family sacrifice had led to this moment of complete professional humiliation, or if this was simply the price of entry into a world that demanded everything and gave nothing in return. Word of Jessica's humiliation spread through Mount Sinai's gossip network like infection through an open wound. In the residence lounge, conversations halted when she entered, replaced by uncomfortable throat clearing and sudden interest in medical journals. The fluorescent lights made everyone look pale and tired, but Jessica felt like she was drowning in institutional silence. "Doctor." Amanda Foster approached with coffee and wisdom earned through her own encounters with Blackwood's wrath. "He broke me down in my second year," she admitted quietly. showing Jessica a small scar on her hand from a stress-induced accident during surgery. But I learned something important. His cruelty says more about his wounds than our worthiness. Meanwhile, Linda Washington began her own investigation, asking veteran nurses about Blackwood's history during their break room conversations. What she discovered unsettled her. A pattern of brilliant surgical outcomes shadowed by a trail of broken students, 3 of whom left medicine entirely. The stories were eerily similar: public humiliation, systematic destruction of confidence, professional execution disguised as teaching. The hospital administration, dazzled by Blackwood's surgical success and research grants, turned a blind eye to his teaching methods. Dr. Reynolds had mentioned concerns, but when Marcus brought in millions in funding and maintained the lowest surgical mortality rate on the East Coast, uncomfortable questions about his mentoring style seemed less urgent. Linda's investigation revealed something else that made her stomach turn. Marcus himself had once been humiliated as a student, suggesting a cycle of abuse that perpetuated itself through institutional indifference and the worship of surgical excellence above human decency. 3 weeks after Jessica's humiliation, Miguel Rivera arrived at Mount Sinai's emergency department clutching his chest, his face gray with pain and fear. The irony felt cosmic. The same hospital where his daughter's dreams were shattered became the stage for his own medical crisis. Jessica, working her night shift in the ER, saw her father's name on the patient roster and felt her world tilt off its axis. She rushed to his bedside, switching between English with the medical staff and rapid Spanish with her panicked father.
You know what I gotta say?
No te preocupes por el viejo.
Jersey
Concentrate
City
en tus estudios.
is so diverse.
Miguel managed weakly, even
So
in his
why do
pain
we
trying to
treat
comfort
black
her.
people
Don't
the
worry
way
about
we
the
do?
old man.
Oh, we need
Focus
a-
on
we
your
need a
studies.
medic.
The
Right
attending
here.
physician ordered immediate cardiac catheterization, and when the results revealed severe coronary blockages requiring emergency surgery, there was only one surgeon available with the expertise for such a complex case. Jessica watched in horror as Dr. Marcus Blackwood's name appeared on her father's chart, realizing that the man who destroyed her confidence now held her father's life in his hands. The same hands that had moved with surgical precision while delivering verbal cruelty would now determine whether Miguel Rivera lived to see his daughter become a doctor. The cruel mathematics of fate had delivered the ultimate test. Could she trust her father's life to the man who had systematically tried to destroy her dreams? The monitor's beeping became a countdown to an impossible choice. Jessica faced an impossible choice in the sterile corridor outside the cardiac catheterization lab. Revealing her relationship to Miguel could compromise his care. Personal relationships can cloud medical judgment. But staying silent meant watching the man who humiliated her operate on the person she loved most. She chose silence, a decision that felt like swallowing broken glass. Dr. Blackwood reviewed Miguel's case with his typical clinical detachment, noting the complexity of the required quadruple bypass surgery. This will be challenging, he told his team, unaware that he was describing the operation that would save the father of the student he destroyed weeks earlier. Severe blockages in the LAD, circumflex, and right coronary. We're looking at 8 hours minimum. Jessica maintained her professional mask while dying inside, assisting with preoperative preparations for her own father. She checked his IV, reviewed his medications, and updated his chart with the mechanical precision that medical training demanded, even as her heart shattered with each clinical notation. Miguel, sedated but conscious, squeezed her hand and whispered in Spanish, "Estoy orgulloso de ti, mi doctora pequeña. I'm proud of you, my little doctor." The words broke something fundamental inside Jessica, as she realized she may lose both her father and her faith in medicine in the same operating room where her humiliation began. The antiseptic smell mixed with fear, creating a nauseating cocktail that threatened to overwhelm her professional composure. The cardiac operating room became a stage for 2 simultaneous surgeries, one on Miguel's heart, another on the souls of everyone present. Dr. Blackwood demonstrated why he was considered a master surgeon, his hands moving with an artist's precision through the most complex cardiac procedure of his career. Jessica observed from the gallery, every heartbeat on the monitor echoing in her chest. For 6 hours, she watched the man who broke her spirit fight to save her father's life, creating a psychological paradox that threatened her sanity. During a critical moment when Miguel's heart rhythm became unstable, Jessica involuntarily gasped, a sound that carried across the surgical suite. Dr. Blackwood glanced up briefly, noting the student's unusual emotional investment, but attributing it to learning anxiety. "Pressure's dropping," announced Dr. Kim from anesthesia. Marcus's hands never paused. "Increase the dopamine drip. We need better contractility." His voice carried the calm authority of someone who had navigated these crises hundreds of times. As the surgery progressed successfully, Jessica began to see Marcus differently, not as the monster who humiliated her, but as a deeply skilled healer whose personal failings didn't diminish his medical gifts. This recognition didn't forgive his cruelty, but it complicated her hatred, replacing simple anger with complex understanding. The monitors stabilized. Miguel's heart beat strong and steady under Marcus's careful reconstruction, each suture a testament to surgical mastery that transcended personal animosity. Recovery became the stage for truth. Miguel, emerging from anesthesia with characteristic determination, asked repeatedly for "mi doctora pequeña," his little doctor. Dr. Blackwood, who studied Spanish during his residency in Texas, understood every word and watched in growing realization as Jessica rushed to her father's bedside. The connection hit him like a physical blow. The student he humiliated was the daughter of the man whose life he just saved. In Miguel's recovery room, surrounded by the soft beeping of monitors and afternoon sunlight filtering through hospital windows, 3 lives intersected in a moment of profound recognition. Miguel, despite his weakened state, saw Dr. Blackwood enter and attempted to sit up in gratitude. "Doctor, you saved my life so I can see my daughter become a doctor," he said in accented but clear English, his voice carrying the weight of immigrant dreams and parental pride. Marcus stood frozen, understanding for the first time the full weight of his cruelty. He hadn't just humiliated a student, he had attacked the dreams built on a father's sacrifice. Every weekend shift Miguel worked, every double shift Rosa endured, every dollar saved for Jessica's education, all of it had been dismissed with surgical precision in that operating room weeks ago. Jessica watched both men, seeing her father's dignity and her tormentor's dawning comprehension. Miguel's weathered hands, scarred from years of electronics repair, reached toward Marcus with genuine gratitude. "She's going to be a wonderful doctor," Miguel continued, unaware of the history between them. "She has the heart for healing, like you showed today." The irony cut deep. This man whose life Marcus had just saved was praising the very qualities Marcus had tried to destroy in his daughter. The monitors beeped steadily, marking time as Marcus processed the magnitude of his actions. "Your daughter," Marcus began, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "Source is my pride," Miguel finished, squeezing Jessica's hand. "Everything Rosa and I worked for, it's all in her hands now." Jessica felt the weight of 2 worlds colliding, her father's unconditional love and her mentor's growing understanding of what he had tried to destroy. The afternoon light seemed to illuminate more than just the recovery room. It exposed the human cost of institutional cruelty and the redemptive power of recognition. Marcus looked from father to daughter, seeing for the first time not just a student to be broken, but a young woman carrying the dreams of an entire family. The revelation settled over him like surgical draping, covering everything he thought he knew about strength, teaching, and the true meaning of healing. 6 months later, Mount Sinai's cardiac surgery wing operated under a different rhythm. Dr. Marcus Blackwood still arrived at 5:30 a.m., but his interactions carried the weight of hard-earned wisdom. He implemented monthly mentorship dinners where students shared their struggles without fear of humiliation, his own awkward attempts at encouragement replacing the surgical precision of his former cruelty. Jessica, now in her final year, led these sessions with quiet authority, her confidence rebuilt through patient work and genuine support. The same hands that once trembled while handing instruments now guided nervous first years through their initial OR experiences, with the grace her father had always seen in her. Miguel returned to work, but also volunteered at the hospital, sharing his story with struggling medical students about the dreams carried by immigrant families. His presence in the cardiac wing served as a living reminder that behind every student stood entire families, sacrificing for the promise of healing. The Friday evening dinners at the Rivera family table became a bridge between worlds. Marcus, awkward but genuine, learned to receive the kind of familial love he never knew existed. Rosa would pile extra rice on his plate while Miguel shared stories from the electronics shop, their acceptance of this complicated man, teaching him what grace looked like in practice. Linda Washington watched these transformations with satisfaction, understanding that real change happened slowly, through repeated acts of courage and vulnerability. The hospital corridors still echoed with urgent footsteps and medical conversations, but underneath ran a new current of compassion, proof that even the most hardened hearts could learn to heal. Jessica's graduation speech, delivered with Marcus in the audience and Miguel in the front row, spoke to second chances and the courage required to transform pain into purpose. Her voice carried the strength of a woman who survived her breaking point and chose to rebuild rather than retreat. Medicine taught me that healing requires both precision and compassion, she said, her eyes finding Marcus in the crowd, that the hands that hold the scalpel must also know how to offer comfort. That excellence without empathy is just skilled brutality. Miguel wiped tears from his weathered cheeks as his daughter accepted her diploma, while Marcus applauded with hands that had learned to build up rather than tear down. The afternoon sun streamed through the auditorium windows, illuminating not just a graduation ceremony, but the completion of a transformation that had healed more than just hearts. It had restored faith in the possibility that even the most wounded among us can choose to become healers rather than remain perpetrators of pain.